In today's episode, we are specifically going to talk about how the global North media treated Mussolini, how they covered it, why the global North. Because during the rise of these particular tyrants, much of the global majority was under colonial rule. So the reason I was also asking you guys about Stone Cold Steve Austin's Instagram account or whatever social media is on, because I just saw on Reddit just like 15 minutes back that he has a couple of cats, and firstly, gigantic men with tiny cats is adorable. I think it is the cutest thing ever. And he's one of his cats is Pancho. His name is Pancho. And this cat is fully ignoring him, okay? And he's going, Pancho, come here, Pancho. And he's like, you tiny motherfucker. Which is such a funny thing for him to say. And then Pancho is running and he's disappearing behind a wall. And he goes, Pancho! It is amazing. I really, really want access to his social media. I just want
I
to see
found
what
it.
he's up to. You
I
did?
found it.
Is
Yeah,
it
yeah,
all
yeah.
cat videos?
There are a few cats.
Ah, beautiful.
The first, I think, post and the fourth post there. Oh, actually, there are more. A lot of cat and dog
Yeah.
posts.
Lives in a farm. Also, of course, his name is Steve Austin. I don't know why I was searching with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Of course, he doesn't call himself Stone Cold Steve Austin.
He used to be iconic back in the day, you know.
Oh, yes.
His entry was iconic, like smashing the beer cans and then
Yeah.
drinking out of the smashed cans and yeah, crazy character.
Quite the character when we were
Yeah.
growing up. And there was a point of time in between when I used to live at my aunt's place, and
Mm.
my cousins used to watch a lot of wrestling. I've
Mm-hmm.
never enjoyed watching wrestling. It looks really odd to me. So, but because we were all children
Yeah.
and because they would watch it, I was the guinea pig. So all the moves were conducted on like 9-year-old me.
Mm-hmm.
um, so I have sustained quite a few injuries because of that. The boys have also grown up to be completely unprepared for life, because
Uh-huh.
they were attacking somebody who knew nothing about what what the show was about. So they
Mm-hmm.
have seen a distinct disadvantage in their favor, like an advantage. Disadvantage in their favor is such a
Yeah,
weird
yeah,
thing to say.
yeah, yeah,
An advantage, and then life did
yeah.
not give them that. So they are still struggling, which is okay because I don't like them. You just get to know people I don't like because I speak about them.
And you speak about most of them.
That's not true. I just I dislike a normal amount of people. I just am very open about who I dislike. So it seems like I dislike far too many people, but I like so many people as well.
Fair enough, fair enough. Yesterday we had a gig at Piano Man, and this one gentleman was there in our show, who got flagged for supporting the current government, and we all know who he is. Do
I
you
don't
want to
know who he
take a
is.
guess? Do you want to take a guess? I'll give you hints, or do you want me to tell you the
No,
name?
just tell us and we'll beep out the name. It'll be fun for everybody. The listeners will be a little frustrated.
Okay,
It's great.
I'll give you a little. Okay, yeah, that is actually interesting. So, we had Vikrant Masse yesterday.
What the fuck? I
Uh,
don't know who this person is. This
The
ruins the
actor,
okay,
fun for
right?
me.
Vikrant Massey,
he's
the
an act.
actor. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's an actor. He was in Dil Dhadakne Do, 12th Fail, yeah, 12th Pass. I don't know, remember the name of the
Okay,
movie
I'm
correctly.
looking him. I'm googling him by the time you uh, tell us about
Anyway.
what happened.
So no, so he was there for our show yesterday, and then I went up. Like I was just looking if he had shared some stories on Instagram about us. So I was just looking through. I went through his profile, the people he follow. Like he start following Kapow or not? Then I saw that he follows Congress. He doesn't follow BJP or any account of BJP or Modi. But he was in Delhi for BJP Delhi's event that was like conducted by the current CM, and he was there in the video of Modi Hai To Mumkin Hai also. And when we met, he spoke to us and felt like a decent guy. But then, because the conversation we had right now, like the celebrities who supported Modi, and they got a lot of flack because of it. But on Instagram, he follows Congress. He doesn't follow BJ. I know. I was a bit
I don't care
confused. You
what
know what?
he I don't care whom he follows and what he believes in his personal life as long as his public persona, which is what it influences people.
He's a,
Okay.
he's a decent actor. Yeah, yeah.
I haven't
12th
seen
Pass, I
him.
think, was a good movie.
I haven't seen him. Don't take movie names. Then we have to beep out those also.
No, but why are we bleeping out the name though?
He's a public name. Yeah.
He's a
Oh,
public
right, right.
person. He's a
Yeah,
public
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
figure. We
I
don't need to
forgot.
bleep out
I
the
forgot
name.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't agree with like whatever you do in your personal life is very different from what you like. You can't be like I in my personal life am against what this government is doing, but publicly I have to speak in favor of them and support them fucking killing people like that. That's wild. That's just that's yeah. We come to topic now. So
That's
speaking
why I
of
stopped. Yes,
speaking of right wing governments. Uh, it says that
of
I do have
course.
a segue.
Swagle.
Uh, segue. Speaking of right wing governments, we have seen the decline, I mean, quite the decline, right, of India's mainstream media since the right wing government came to power, that is in
Hmm.
2014,
Hmm.
right? And what was considered neutral and sensible media in the 90s and 2000s became fully right wing over the past 12 years, right? And multiple times over the past years, including amongst the three of us, with our friends, with my friends, we have had conversations on how the media used to be better and more neutral, right?
Hmm.
And we've spoken about this so many times, which sort of got me thinking whether the media was really neutral across history, especially as tyrants rose to power, or do we just
Yep.
believe so because our memories are warped, right? So I started looking into it, and turns out the media was never really neutral, right?
Hmm.
Journalism was always biased one way or the other. Publications always served somebody, either the overlords or the commons. But they
Hmm.
always did serve somebody, and the reporting was always based on how reporters and publications viewed global events, which by its very definition is subjective, right? So that's what we are going to talk about. And because of the sheer volume of information, we are going to do a two-parter this time. So, in this mini series, we are going to talk about how the global North media landscape historically treated two of the most infamous tyrants' rise to power. In today's episode, we are specifically going to talk about how the global North media treated Mussolini, how they covered it, why the global North. Because during the rise of these particular tyrants, much of the global majority was under colonial rule. So the media was pretty much in control of the settlers. But European and American media had the choice of doing their jobs well and serving the people, and most of them chose not to. And we are going to see exactly how. Now, coming to Mussolini, a very small introduction. We are going to map out a lot of the coverage in major historical events that happened in relation to Mussolini, right? We will not get into completely all the details of Mussolini's rise to power because that's just insane content, and we'll have to do like 5 episodes for that, right? But as an introduction, Benito Mussolini was, before he became this dictator, he was a journalist first, and then he went to World War One. Then he came back. He was still a journalist, and then he became a dictator who ruled Italy from 1922 until he was overthrown in 1943. Right, and although fascism has its roots back in ancient Greece, Mussolini was arguably one of the most prominent modern propagators of fascism. right? He actually founded it's called again, my pronunciation is going to be terrible for Italian words. Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, which translates to Italian faces of combat. Faces as an FASCES, so the fascism root word, right? And he founded this in 1919, which then became the National Fascist Party in 1921, in 2 years, right? And Mussolini was appointed as the Prime Minister of Italy after the March on Rome in 1922. This March on Rome is also what we are going to talk about, because this was the main turning point for Mussolini, right? And through this, he established a totalitarian dictatorship in Italy, right? Then he went on to see Italy's participation in World War II as a very, very prominent member of the Axis powers. And then finally, he was shot. He was executed near the end of the war, near the end of World War II in 1945. Quite a long, dictatorship he managed to pull off, right? Now, while Mussolini was rising to power, much of the global North media was singing praises for Mussolini, barring a few niche ones criticizing him. And in any media landscape, there will be mainstream functioning in certain way, but niche ones criticizing him, or going against what is going on in the mainstream. That does happen. We see that in Indian media as well. That was happening during Mussolini's time as well. But the mainstream media was very much in favor of Mussolini, right? So I'm quoting from this magazine called Smithsonian Magazine. It follows a lot of history. It does a lot of historical reporting, right?
Yeah, it's from the Smithsonian Museum's magazine, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, right. So it says, now this is talking about the March on Rome, right? Benito Mussolini secured Italy's premiership by marching on Rome with 30,000 black shirts in 1922. Let me pause for a second and tell you what, if you are not aware of who the black shirts were, think of their Hindutva gang, right? Their saffron, the Bhagwa gang, the saffron holders, Uh, so they were basically fascist armed squads, right? And this whole thing, the March on Rome, this was basically an insurrection. The black shirts, they literally wore black shirts. That's why they were called black shirts. Not very creative in how they were brought out, but
no, but
we also
it's
call
simple. It's simple. It's
it's
Yeah, yeah,
simple.
practical. It's very
yeah.
easy
Yeah,
to
it's
get
easy
used
to remember.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we
makes
still
sense.
refer to
It's
yeah,
good
and we still
branding, if
refer to the
anything.
militia. Okay, let's not praise them. In still, even today, we recognize them as black shirts only, like the Mussolini's militia, right? So the black shirts on in 1922, they captured strategic local places in Italy. And at that point of time, Italy had a king and a government. And this government had resigned, but they were still there. Like Italy had a complicated fucking structure, right? And the king, this was King Victor Emmanuel the Third. He refused to listen to the government. So the government was like the now defunct government, but still functioning sort of government. They were like, "Can you please send the army against this militia, because this is going to lead to literally the downfall of any semblance of governance in Italy." And the king refused to listen to him. There's a lot of speculation on why the king refused, but most accepted theory is that because he didn't want to piss off the masses, right? I don't know why a king would be bothered about that, but sure. Okay, so he didn't listen to the government, and he sent the army against the black shirts. So black shirts were basically, they just had free reign, and Mussolini, basically just captured the governance of Italy like in a matter of days, right? And by 1925, he had declared himself the leader for life, right? So I'm coming back to the article. While this hardly reflected American values, I'm quoting again, right? While this hardly reflected American values, Mussolini was a darling of the American press. appearing in at least 150 articles from 1925 to 1932. Most neutral, bemused, or positive in tone. The Saturday Evening Post even serialized Il Duce's autobiography. Il Duce is Mussolini. It's the title given to him. Saturday Evening Post even serialized Il Duce's autobiography in 1928, acknowledging that the new fasciti movement was a bit rough in its methods. Papers ranging from the New York Tribune to the Cleveland Plain Dealer to the Chicago Tribune credited it with saving Italy from the far left and revitalizing its economy. From their perspective, the post-World War I surge of anti-capitalism in Europe was a vastly worse threat than fascism. Ironically, when the media acknowledged that fascism was a new experiment, papers like the New York Times commonly credited it with returning turbulent Italy to what it called normalcy. So that was what was happening in the media, right? And I'm going to take you through a few articles and a few, excerpts. And it was super interesting reading these because it's like a time capsule, right? And much of it is, of course, New York Times. I will say this about New York Times, even though it historically has always taken the wrong stance. In fact, now you can rely on New York Times in a weird way that you read anything that is published in New York Times and you can doubt it. You can be like, it probably has far more to this than these idiots are telling us, right? It's that bad. But it also is very meticulous in archiving its historical records, right? You will see a lot of like archived records as not just as digital replication, but also as the paper itself, right? This was the Sunday, November 5th newspaper. October 30th was when Mussolini took power. The march on Rome happened on October 28th. This is November 5th, literally a week later. And the headline says, Mussolini, hope of youth, Italy's man of tomorrow. Hard work, his creed. Okay, that's what the article says. And I am going to quote from this article, and you can see Mussolini's sort of like, the sketch having been put up. We'll, of course, for the listeners, we'll put this up on Instagram as well. I love seeing articles that were in print and everything.
I have a very weird question. It says that he was 38 at that time, right? During this article.
Yeah.
In that photo, he looks way older than 38. What happened to him?
It is, I guess
Stress.
dictatorship will do that. But also we are talking about like 1920s and 1930s. This is 1920s, early 1920s. Healthcare wasn't great. And he had fought in World War One and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
He was
even,
apparently not getting produced from the volcanic soil, it seems. It's supposed to be
oh
healthy.
my, I should have known that this would be this is what you would be talking about.
What? The
But
one thing that world over Italy is famous for is the volcanic soil and the vegetables that grow there. So,
again, there
well,
was so much bombing and everything. I wonder how much of that soil also had so much of like gunpowder mixed in it after a point of time. And
that's fair.
I don't know, 1920s healthcare wasn't great. Medical advancement wasn't fantastic. So I like the life expectancy was low. And also, if you've gone to one war, I don't
Yeah.
expect you're
Yeah,
going
fair. That's fair.
to,
That
You
is
know,
fair.
there
yeah.
was this article I saw where this photographer back in the day, he photographed soldiers before going to the war and after coming back from the war, and their faces had completely
I,
changed. Like they
yeah.
they aged.
I know
So
what you're talking about. Yeah. Who knew that killing people had a mental health implication, that it takes a toll on you, that it is not the normal fucking thing to do? Who could have told?
No one, to be very
Fucking.
no,
honest.
Okay.
Sandy.
Before So we are going to go to this article, which is Mussolini, Hope of Youth, Italy's Man of Tomorrow. So what this article says, right? In its introduction, it starts off this way. It says, everything is possible in Italy. The speaker was Benito Mussolini, the new Italian premier. The place was Rome. The time, just the other day. Since then, his words have become reality. He has been swept into the seats of the mighty on that overpowering wave of fascismo. Just as fascismo is a political phenomenon without parallel in history, so Mussolini a leader without political precedent. I want to pause for a second. Only an American can write this. Only an American reporter can write this, especially at that point of time. Fascism was not a political phenomenon without parallel in history. Anybody who has just remotely read about ancient Greece will tell them, right? And Mussolini was definitely not a leader without political precedent. Across across history, more often than not, people came into power through conquering and not democratic elections. So it was a very standard thing to happen in history. It's only when elections started happening that this was frowned upon, right? But anyway, continuing this, he is the political phenomenon of modern Italy, rising like a flame from the ashes of her cumbersome, confusing, parasite covered bureaucratic regime, right? And this is the first paragraph, right? And the article is essentially an interview of Mussolini, but the reporter's name was Alice Rohe, writes about him in the most weirdly and uncomfortably romantic manner. It is the strangest fucking interview I have ever read. And I'm going to give some excerpts, right? It is, of course, we will
Where are you
link
getting the
this.
experts from?
There was no expert involved in this. So not even like
you
the people who
promised us
are
experts.
no,
So where are
not
these
even the people
experts
who were
from?
reporting. Not even people who were reporting were experts. Clearly, these are only excerpts, right? And we will, of course,
Disappointing.
link this. We will link this article in the description notes. I would highly recommend reading the entire article. This is like less than a week after an insurgency in the country. Like, right? It's so crazy. Okay. So this is a section of an interview that I'm quoting. What would be your very first step as head of the government? I asked. He answered in one word, discipline. And then I queried, discipline for everyone. That is a good beginning, he replied. What steps would you take to place Italy on a firm economic basis? How would you silence the voice of unrest, for instance, over the exchange? Work. Surely there was a challenge to new international effort in that word. Production, he continued. That is the cornerstone upon which I would build a government. And your foreign policy? I asked. Equilibrium and conciliation. This is a legitimate interview. Like, very honestly, if you were interviewing somebody and they responded in one word like this, would you think that this is an interview worth conducting?
I was just thinking that he basically brought out all his words of the day for the past 15 days and just used them in the interview.
Correct. Fucking mean nothing, right? And about this part of the interview, what was most surprising to me is what the reporter says, right? She says, to a person who has lived long in Italy, the utterances of Mussolini were significant. She's referring to herself living for a long time in Italy, right? She continues, he seemed to put his finger on the weakest spots with a clarifying touch. Just the two words, discipline and work, spoken tersely and unemotionally, expressed volumes of understanding. A man of brevity. Did it though? Did it, express volumes of understanding? It just seems like neither of you knew what you were talking about.
I think what he understood was that the reporter was extremely annoying. I think that's also why he didn't want to answer them. I don't know whether that's a man or a woman. I'm assuming it's a man because of the times.
Woman.
It's a
No,
woman.
woman. Alice Yu. Yeah.
Ah,
Woman.
okay.
And I mean, by the end of the interview, we'll get to this part also. By the end of the interview, Mussolini also was like, He was so surprised. He was like, for a woman, you have political understanding. Fucking horrible man in every way possible. And anyway, this is how she talks about the interview, right? Another excerpt. Looking at Mussolini, I saw him as the real leader of Italy, and his story came to mind. The man of iron, who, despite almost fatal wounds received in the war, shows no trace of physical weakness, had a most extraordinary background for the premiership of Italy. Mussolini was born in Romagna in 1884. You must not forget that my father was an ironmonger, he informed me when talking of his past. I just want to pause for a second here. This sentence has no context to what came before and is never referred to again later. I don't know why Mussolini found it important to inform her that his father was an ironmonger, and I do not know why later why she felt it was important to put in this without talking about anything related to his
Or
father,
it could be
right?
the editor also. The editor could have just removed the context so as to, because during those days they used to set the articles in slots,
Yeah,
right?
space. Yeah,
The
you have
space wise.
space.
So
Yeah,
maybe someone deleted a couple of paragraphs here and there just to ensure that it fits into the right space there. I mean, we can speculate all we want. Like all of this could be
possible.
true. Nothing of this could be true. So we don't really
Possible.
know.
I am just going to assume incompetence on everybody's part. Because the rest of the article is also written badly. So it's also the reporter doing her job quite badly. But anyway,
I'm
she
also
continues.
assuming she is Italian, the reporter.
No, she's American. She's an American correspondent in Italy. She's writing, this is the New York Times. She's writing for New York Times. So she continues, Mussolini is one of the most, oh God, Mussolini is one of the most cultured men in Italy, but he gleaned his knowledge at no age-dried fonts of learning. In his early years, he began an intellectual vagabondage, which has given him an international erudition. He knows many languages, having worked at jobs of all sorts to finance himself while he studied the literature of other lands in their native tongues. From his intellectual vagabondage, he would often return to his home in Romagna, where, shut off from the world, he would give himself over to veritable debauches of study. At times, he taught French, and always he wrote. His short stories are bitter and cynical, the fruit of his wanderings. Many-sided personality. It is the oddest fucking praise that I have seen. Like it's a very, very weird way to praise somebody. And all of this within like a week of marching and illegally occupying a country, the governance of a country. Also, with Mussolini convinced that the woman with political understanding was an impossibility. Like he literally says that to his face, right? He says that for a woman, you are highly educated and you understand political nuances a lot. And she says, do you think a woman, being given the same opportunities and education cannot have this political understanding? He's like, no, of course not. It's an impossibility. Okay. Despite that, she writes this article like, have some sense of pride, if not responsibility. Not even that. Okay. So this was a week after March to Rome. Now, November 12th, 1922, that is less than 2 weeks after Mussolini took power, right? And again, this is again the New York Times, because very honestly, the easiest to find. I want to give a caveat here. Not a caveat, I just want to inform something. New York Times was not the only terrible coverage. Like New York Times was not the only publication doing a fuck all job of journalism. Most mainstream media was, right? New York Times just has a better record kept, right? So from this November 12th article, a very short article, but I'm giving like the introduction. It says, Benito Mussolini, the new Italian president of the council, in keeping with the character of the man and of the revolution which he created, inspired and made successful, took over the portfolios of interior and of foreign affairs. He has made a good beginning in each. The article goes on to describe what Mussolini will be doing in terms of firing the older diplomats and reform plans, etc., completely ignoring the coup that he held, right? My problem with this kind of reporting is this very clearly shows how not neutral media has always been. If you are talking about what he is doing, how he is going to take over he has taken over 2 ministries, he's taken over 2 portfolios, right? He's going to put that in place. Talk about his, reform plans without saying he has made a good beginning in each. What are you doing? What? It's not neutral, right? And it is informing people's opinions, right? With the opinions that they have. And it's easy. I'm also bringing this caveat. It is easy to sit here and because we have the political inclination of what we do, and because we know what Mussolini went on to do and what Hitler went on to do, that we can call these media articles absolutely nonsense. And that's also what I want to do because they were nonsense. But I also want you all and the listeners to remember that it's the fact that even if you look at movements that you might have been in favor of, the media would have been biased at that point of time also, whether for it or against it, depends on what your beliefs are and what their beliefs are, but always very subjective, right? There was nothing known as objective reporting. It doesn't exist because we are people and human beings have come from a subjective, like we all have a subjective viewpoint. There's no objective viewpoint, right? It doesn't exist, right? Now, this was what papers like New York Times saying. There, on the other end, there were papers like the New Yorker and the New York Herald that were apparently more critical of Mussolini. I found only articles and reports mentioning that they were critical. I could not find their digital archives, so I don't know what those articles said, but they said that they were critical, right, of Mussolini. So there were some niche publications and reporters who were questioning why everybody was so happy with a tyrant. But overall, the global media was far too happy praising Mussolini's defeat of, socialism and communism, right? And that's what the direction was. And this was what the American media was primarily talking about. Now, another global North media that we absolutely have to cover is, of course, the British media. What was the British media doing at that point of time? Especially in hindsight, now in hindsight, because the British was arguably one of the biggest opponents of the Axis powers, right? America sort of just got looped into the Allied powers, but British was at Britain was at the helm of affairs. They would have lost out on a lot of their colonies. They would have had to be less of an asshole if they'd let other assholes come to power, right? So British media, what they said in 1922 to 1923 is also interesting, and we are going to get into that after this little bit of an ad break. One small digression, because I think we all need some breather, as is the norm in my episodes. So we'll see you all after this tiny ad break. Okay, we are back, and we were going to start talking about British media, how the British media depicted Mussolini, right? And I'm quoting from this organization's website called Rogue Nation. So this organization maintains historical records that talk about the terrible side of British history, which is arguably all of it, but also what is not taught in Britain schools, right? The title of the article is British Press Coverage of Fascism in Italy, June 1922 to October 1923. And then they put a subtitle. Okay. It says, includes a list of astonishing quotations from 220 British press eulogies to fascism. And I read those quotes. I read all 220 of them because they were addictive as fuck. Okay, and they're actually eulogies. Like they praise each and every 220 in a matter of less than a year, all praising fascism, not even one questioning it. Right? Sorry,
Why
I should
would
have
Britain
taken
not
this.
not praise them though? Like, I mean, they have been fascist towards other people, I guess, not their own people for the longest
Yeah,
time. But
yeah. And also, I feel like Britain went against, when we'll cover this also, Britain went against Mussolini during the later parts when it
yeah,
was very clear that Mussolini was a threat to Britain colonies, right? Otherwise, they were pretty happy with all
Britain
fascists. They
was
were
very
like,
happy with Hitler also. Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, they got along very well.
yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
royal family had like
yeah,
proper ties to Hitler. It was, again, Hitler also was trying to court them,
yeah, 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 yeah.
they're all assholes coming together. It is only when they started threatening each other that they would go against each other, right?
This is just like a
uh
bunch of dumb people's version of Game of Thrones, genuinely. Like,
I don't know if dumb, because the evil for sure, massively evil, but I don't know how dumb or how.
Their ideologies were similar, no? They're the better race and the better
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
whatever. So
yeah.
both of them had the same ideology.
That's also why Hitler, like this Aryan myth.
Yeah.
And if there is even a single right winger who is still listening to this, Aryans don't exist. It's a myth. It's been proven repeatedly. So fuck you.
No,
Um,
Ashmita,
But you
what are
can
you
find the
saying?
Aryans on the internet. They have good songs, though. Hmm.
so for the listeners, what I'm showing the guys is this
It's a
is a
collage.
compilation.
It's a
Yeah,
collage
it's a
of
collage.
headlines.
Yes, right. And this was the pro-fascist headlines from only June 1922 to October 1923, right? Which is at the point of time when Mussolini was coming to power.
He was knighted.
He was knighted by the Britain
Fuck.
crown. The article's headlines are stuff like London fascists welcome return to London of King and Queen, the Red Dragon and the Black Shirts, the true story of a great movement, how Italy found her soul, Mussolini, the man and the myth, Mussolini, what Europe owes to him. All of this, like it's horrifying. Right? And this is just a
Man and
few.
the myth.
Yeah, just a few of the
To be
articles,
fair, he
right?
was a myth at that time, I guess.
He was not. I was a myth.
Now he's
He
not a
was
myth
not a myth.
anymore, but maybe he was a myth at that point of time.
No,
What do you mean, no?
he
It's
wasn't.
possible.
He was.
Anyway, this article of Rogue Nation. By the way, you all should check out the website Rogue Nation. It's doing a pretty good job of historical records, right?
I think you've
Anyway,
mentioned it
this.
before also, if I'm not wrong. I think
No,
you've
I came
mentioned.
across this for
No?
the first time. I
Okay.
came across this for the
So
first
I
time.
don't believe either one of yours memory, so it doesn't matter. This last 2 minutes was a waste. So it could have been there, it could not have been there. Who knows, right? Neither one of you does for sure. That's a fact.
Go
So we can
go
move
and
on.
listen to our episode. Go and listen to our episodes and and tell us if she's mentioned it or not.
Oh God, so funny.
Like pot and kettle fighting with each other as to who is more black. Like literally, bro. Anyway, move on.
Okay. So what this article says, Britain's newspapers, almost without exception, were either strongly sympathetic to or openly euphoric over Italy's fascist coup in October 1922, which brought Mussolini and his black shirts to power. They deliberately deluded the British public into believing, as the Reuters Rome correspondent reported, that the fascist movement is proceeding peacefully, adding gleefully, though falsely, that the whole nation sympathizes with the determination of the fascisti to affirm the national spirit and to purify and strengthen public life and the government. A pause here. Now we know this, that every time this word purify comes along, nothing good comes after this. Like, legitimately, no political movement or personal outlook with the word purify has any implication that is not just disgustingly inhumane. You talk about the casteism in India. You talk about Modi's and BJP's sort of how they ran the election, how they continue to behave. You talk about Hitler. You talk about Mussolini. You talk about any dictator. You talk about British, any colonizer. Purifying has never been great. And that time, I guess they didn't really know about that, right? The article continues. The Daily Telegraph asserted triumphantly that fascism has attracted to itself the best elements of Italy, while the Observer correspondent crowed that Italy, old and young, sighs with relief that they have a strong man in charge of affairs. Does this remind you of something, guys? Does this
Good.
remind you of 2014 media response after a particular gentleman came into power, that finally we have a strong man in charge of affairs in India? I mean, the way history repeats itself is not even like subtly, and yet I don't know what we are just extremely idiotic people. I don't know what else to say. That we have just replicated all fascist regimes, and we still continue doing that. Anyway, the article continues. Equally elated, the Yorkshire Post trumpeted that the whole city of Rome has been on the tiptoe of expectation since the early morning, and everyone wishing to see and cheer Signor Mussolini. And the man from Daily Mail gushed that many of the onlookers, especially the women, cannot restrain their tears. Such a fucking weird thing to say. This is one of the main reasons why I like Rogue Nation, because a couple of articles that I read, very dryly they will make fun of the articles by not even like putting their opinions there, like exactly opposite of who I am, right? No overtly expressive opinions. Sandy, your style. They will just repeat what the other person said and let them make fun of themselves. It is amazing. I absolutely loved reading these articles, right? Now, the article goes on to show how the British media, how they behaved during this time. But I want to come to some of the quotes that I mentioned while talking about this article in the beginning, right? That this article has compiled from British media, remember, in a span of less than a year, right? One from the Daily Telegraph on 2nd June 1922. This is 2nd June 1922 means much before the insurgency, right? But the fascist party was very much there, right? Remember, the fascist party was established in 1921, right? The fascisti, so far, referring to a local power grab in Bologna, have committed relatively few excesses. But they have sacked some socialist and communist meeting places, set fire to some labor exchanges, literal fire to some labor exchanges, and prevented the firemen from doing their
How
duty.
else would you set fire?
No,
Like, what do you
they are
mean
not
literal
talking about.
fire?
They are not talking about metaphorical fire, like the
Like
the
dancing on
country's
the
governance
on
is
the
on.
dance floor. They are like ripping it on the dance floor, and like everyone is like,
No,
wow.
you know what I'm talking about.
No, no, no,
Not
no.
They are not talking about like the metaphorical setting fire to the governance or something like that. In the same sentence, while saying that they committed relatively few excesses, they say that they set fire to buildings and then stopped the firemen from doing their work.
Yeah, it's like how we set fire to buses here. No, just a couple of buses
Buses
got
are
burned.
empty. Those buses are empty.
Yeah,
This
also
is
buildings
labor
sometimes.
exchanges. No, labor exchanges fully with people. People died.
Oh God, acha. I thought they emptied out the building and then they set fire. Or they
Yes,
didn't?
that is what fascists are known for taking sensible measures.
I mean, I always try to give the benefit of doubt to everyone before
To
they say
fascists,
it.
I think, okay, I will point out here for Sandy, because I know that you don't do this often, but I have a big problem with people who do. You cannot give benefit of doubt over critical thinking. If people are proving to you who they are repeatedly, and fascists do, there's no benefit of doubt to be given to them. It is just now a common derivation of what they've done, right? So no benefit of doubt ever to be given to fascists. They have never ever demonstrated that they have come from a good place, right? By the way, this article was called the title of this article by the Daily Telegraph was Amazing Scenes in Italian City Seized by Fascisti. Horrifying, okay? Then there was this article called Londonderry Sentinel. This was on 3rd August 1922. Again, before the insurgency. In Italy, the fascisti have narrowly saved their country from an orgy of communist violence and spoliation surpassing Moscow at its worst. So it
I'll tell you why they're all jizzing over themselves. I think all of this must have reminded them of the beautiful scenes in India back then, you know? So they must be like, oh my God, you remember the good old days when we used to ransack these buildings and burn the people alive? Look at this thing in all its glory, you know?
To be fair, 1922 means Jallianwala Bagh in India has happened just like 3 years back. So they have been still burning, and like at this point of time was when the Indian independence movement, the complete freedom struggle, just really kicked off. So they were still very heavily burning people, building, everything in India.
Yeah, maybe they were just
But
reminiscing. They just saw part of themselves. They're like, oh man,
yeah,
remember the good old days when we used to burn people alive. Oh God,
yeah.
I wish we could do that
And
again.
also,
But you know,
this is Stalin breathing his last, right? It is during that period also. So, they have seen like the most terrible impact of communism. But at the same point of time, they themselves were imperialist assholes, which they couldn't see. Right? They didn't think they were doing anything wrong. They thought they were civilizing people. It was side note. It was always funny to me that people who couldn't, people who wouldn't wash their assholes, people who didn't know how to make like decent food, how they thought civilizing different parts of the world was okay. Like it's so weird to me.
because they never ate enough spice to having to clean their asshole.
What do
You
you
know,
mean shit is still dirty, Sandy? Even if there's no spice, it's literally waste. You always wash your asshole. This is so weird. Anyway, this is a fuck all discussion that just started. I apologize for that. I'm going to come back
you
to the
started
quotes.
this. You
I
started
started
this
it,
discussion.
which is why I apologized. Okay. Anyway, I'm coming back to the quotes. Okay. Now this is one by Sheffield Daily Telegraph, 5th August 1922. No government loves the fascisti, whose lawless methods are bound to offend respectable politicians. But for all that, these young men are Italy's surest safeguard against revolution. They uphold the Italian state with a resoluteness that orthodox politicians dare not show, and government profit by their deeds, even while ostensibly countenancing them. Right? So this was the Sheffield Daily Telegraph. The title of the article, very standard title, The Fascisti. Because they try to present like both sides by just giving a caveat at the beginning that no government loves the fascisti, but then continuing praising them. Okay. Now, one of the weirdest fucking ones that I've read, and this is, I promise, the last one I'm going to read out to you because there are 220 quotes. I strongly, advise, like, I strongly recommend setting aside an afternoon, sitting with a glass of wine and reading all of that. It's pretty fucking
What if
fantastic.
just one episode of yours is reading out all the 220 headlines, Ashmita, the articles?
Anyway, this was the London Daily News on 8th August 1922, the fascisti. It says, suddenly a number of youths board our tram, springing in with wonderful agility while it is running at full speed. They break into a stirring, patriotic song. I turn to the man beside me. Who are these young men? I ask. The fascisti, he replies. I look at them now with interest. These jolly, refined looking boys, the fascisti? I had always imagined that the members of this movement were lawless roughs. But judging from their appearance and tones of voice, they apparently belong to the cultured classes. Fine looking young fellows they are, tall, lithe, and athletic. Most of them between the ages of 18 and 24 years, though their leaders are evidently much older. My companion tells me that many of them are university men and idealists. They hope to be the saviors of the country. This is G.A.
Who is
Maxwell
this?
writing.
Who is this journalist lusting over these people, dude? Like,
Exactly. This is, I would say this is either, closeted homosexuality, closeted homosexuality, because
you invented a new term altogether.
because I mean, because at this point of time, if you came out as gay, I would assume they would kill you or something like that. As is the case with
Yeah.
some parts of the world even today. But 1922, right? It's bad. Or this can also go really, really terrible. He might also be some sort of a pedophile. I don't know, like he's talking about 18-year-old boys. It's a disgusting way to talk about 18-year-old boys.
Whoever
They're
it
barely
was,
legal.
they clearly came in their pants. Like, there's no doubt about it. Whoever it was. Talking about their
So
lithe, agile
fucking
frames. What the fuck, bro? Huh? Also,
tall life.
have you seen kids jumping onto the Mumbai local and doing all kinds of nonsense shit on top of the train,
Oh,
on side of the
Sandy,
train?
come on.
Right?
Yeah, but they are
So
not cultured classes. No, come on. We are not part of the cultured classes. This
I
is
don't know.
British
Like,
talking. Now we are going to talk about, we are back to now American media, but this is now through Mussolini's rule, right? Like the pre-March of Rome and during March of Rome and just after has has been what you have seen, right? And there is something to say about, okay, maybe they didn't know, they were just so anti-communism. They just didn't know what would happen, right? Because we are just famously bad at predicting. Like we have, that's true for humanity as a whole. We don't know how to predict the future. So maybe they didn't know. Okay. But what happened during Mussolini's rule, right? So I'm quoting from this master's thesis paper titled The Marketing of Mussolini, American Magazines and Mussolini 1922 to 1935. It's a really well-written paper. It's a fucking 187 pages or something long. It was written over 6 years, so there's intense research that has gone in. And instead of quoting from all of the different parts of this sources of this paper, I'm going to quote just from the paper because it is a very reliable one from what I saw, right? So there's a section, it says, the resilient Mussolini. Throughout the 1920s, Mussolini had an uncanny way of distancing himself from at least some of the intrigue within Italy. Even his inflammatory speeches were forgiven by some in the American media. The 1920s was an era of pragmatism in the United States. Business became king, as did the Hamiltonian principles that accompanied it. As Jefferson liberalism waned, so did some of the concern over the loss of certain liberties in Italy. Mussolini was changing Italy and making it look more like the United States, partially by placing business at the fore. American businessmen liked it for obvious reasons, but the rest of the American populace also took note. With vast improvements to public utilities and roads, the drainage of swamps for more living and working areas, drainage of swamps, please note, for more living and working areas, the demolition of slums, unemployment and pension programs, and efforts to curb street begging, Italy was becoming modern by American standards and began to mimic the United States. Americans saw this progress and saw how Italians responded to Mussolini, according to many accounts in popular magazines, by chanting his name in unison by the thousands. They were willing to accept that loss of liberty in exchange for results. By the end of the decade, Il Duce was still a controversial figure, but his accomplishments and his longevity as a leader in a nation that saw previous governments turn over like pancakes in a diner made many American journalists, some more grudgingly than others, offer him respect. So this is why I like this paper so much, because it does talk about how this subjectivity and bias comes along, right? Like you are obviously going to be biased towards people with similar outlook, similar thought processes. And America at that time was becoming capitalized, right? So capitalism was at its, it was growing at a tremendous rate. So obviously, when Italy, they saw what was happening in Italy as similar to what was happening in America, and conservatism and capitalism always go hand in hand, because the left of center onwards to even far left is always more about public. It starts with public service, goes to public servitude, but that's the viewpoint, right? It's always about social aspects rather than making rich people richer, right? So this paper sort of really clarifies that and gives an insight into why American journalism was so pro Mussolini, right? I continue quoting from the paper. It says, what made Italy different from other European nations of the time was a sense that there was real progress occurring on the peninsula. As mentioned before, this stood in stark contrast to the Italy of the first 2 decades of the century. In a response in current history to H.G. Wells' attack, Roman newspaper editor Tommaso Ciliani emphasized the restoration of order after years of socialist violence and the high esteem in which Italians hold the concept of the nation. Nationalism acquires the value of a religion, justifying some of the apparent abuses of power by the fascist government. The truth, according to Silani, is that Italians revere Mussolini for bringing them out of the chaos, eliminating class conflict, modernizing their economy and infrastructure, and restoring their national pride. I'm going to pause here and point this out. This is the beginning of all nationalist movements. You see this. You saw this with Germany. You saw this with France. You saw this with America. This is pretty standard, right? That's how it begins. The paper continues. The economic recovery was of special interest to American businessmen and the US government. Not only did it signal more opportunities for worthwhile investments of American capital, which Mussolini always quoted, but it also meant that Italy would be more likely to pay its war debts. JP Morgan and Company's extension of $50 million in credit to Italy certainly made headlines in the American press. If JP Morgan had faith in the Italians to pay up, noted some media outlets, there must be something to this Mussolini fellow. Again, I'm going to pause. It is hilarious to me, in hindsight, that JP Morgan was considered the authority in making sensible financial decisions. It's amazing, right? Anyway, the paper continues. Editors at the Outlook agreed. The prevailing sentiment in Italy appears to be a desire to do the right thing in maintaining strong relations with the United States and paying off the debt. Right? So it turns out that the media supporting what business stands to gain over the actual lives of people is not new at all. And this is, if you remember how we kicked off the episode, right, at the top of the episode, that media has always served somebody. Either they will serve the overlords or they will serve the commons. And we have seen this over and over and over again. Networks, large networks, right? Not the smaller independent bodies, but large networks do tend to serve the overlords. Now, the positive coverage of Mussolini went on not just in America, but in much of the colonialist countries' media. And not just in the 1920s, but well into the 1930s, right? In 1930s, something important happened. Right? This was 1935 specifically, October 1935, where Italy under Mussolini attacked Ethiopia without a prior declaration of war. This was quite an important event in history. So those of you who have studied or have read about World War II, you know that this is believed to be one of the main incidents that led to World War II, right? So during this time, the world's first intergovernmental organization was called League of Nations, and they were basically what the UN is today, right? The UN came out of Allied forces. So if the Allied forces had not won World War II, there would be no UN, right? This was League of Nations at that point of time. And it was formed after the First World War as a means to maintain peace, right? And it was as effective as maintaining global peace as the UN is today, right? No
I was
change
just about to
in.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have made
It's pretty much.
an iota of difference.
Nope.
An iota of difference.
Nope. Same competence, right? I'm quoting from the Britannica, okay, about this Ethiopian war from 1935 to 1936. In response to the Ethiopian appeals, the League of Nations condemned the Italian invasion in 1935 and voted to impose economic sanctions on the aggressor being Italy and Mussolini. The sanctions remained ineffective, surprise, surprise, because of general lack of support. Although Mussolini's aggression was viewed with disfavor by the British, who had a stake in East Africa. The other major powers had no real interest in opposing him. So you see that it's a trend that goes on even till today, that you only oppose certain acts of war if it economically benefits you. If it doesn't, you don't give a fuck, right? Britannica continues. The war, by giving substance to Italian imperialist claims, contributed to international tensions between the fascist states and the Western democracies. It also served as a rallying point after World War II for developing African nationalist movements. I just want to correct one thing. It was not contributing to international tensions between fascist states and Western democracies. It was contributing to tensions between fascist states and other imperialist states. It was not a fight between fascism and democracy. It was a fight between two groups of countries on who would retain what land that did not belong to them, right? To neither of the groups. So us and the global majority hate all of these people to, equally. Like all of them were fuck all people, right? But anyway, it was only at this time that Mussolini started losing his appeal with the global media. So 1935, remember from 1922 to 1935, he had a very, very positive outlook media had a very positive outlook towards him, right? I'm going to quote from, again, the paper that I was talking about, the master's thesis, right? Mussolini's image in America never recovered from the Ethiopian War. His mercurial career had made him the centerpiece of the American foreign press and had brought him fame throughout the world. Now his most resolute devotees were suddenly quiet. His most scornful critiques were louder than ever. The American press no longer viewed him as the practical, realist, hard-nosed leader that had saved Italy, but rather as a violent, imperialist, war-hungry tyrant threatening the stability of Europe. As the press went, so went public opinion and later governmental policy. In a matter of months, Mussolini's popularity plummeted in the United States and around throughout Europe. Soon, only one major political leader would be willing to work with him, and the price of friendship with Adolf Hitler would prove to be terrible. Benito Mussolini had no idea that by invading Ethiopia, he had signed his own death warrant. Right? Overall, pretty depressing. Very, very depressing, because all of this, I would point out that all of this, the discussions in League of Nations, the media coverages, was not really pro-Ethiopia. People died over there. Mussolini had no business. Europe had no business being in Ethiopia. But imperialist states, that's not how they behave. It's either them gaining control of a land or somebody else. And that's how they viewed this. So it was a very depressing part of history, right? On that very, very depressing note, just a little bit more depressing shit, go listen to some ads, please. And then we are going to come back and we're going to talk about the last leg of other kinds of media, not just American and British.
He also
And
apparently did some podcasts around that time.
that is the terrible thing that only we do. Anyway, we'll see you after ads. All right, we are back. We are talking about media coverage during the attack on Ethiopia. And we have talked about American and British media. Now we are going to talk about some other media as well. Okay. Starting off with Italian media, Now, Mussolini himself, like I mentioned, was a journalist, right, before he became a dictator. So he understood the power of press really well, right? And he contended, he's on record saying fascism requires militant journalism. And he created an environment where the Italian press would often self-censor themselves so as to not appear anti-national, right? And as he started gaining more and more power, he started increasing the censorship on media, especially when he started working with Hitler and Goebbels, right? Because Goebbels was, of course, the king of censorship, media censorship and PR, right? Goebbels is arguably the father of PR. I mean, there's very little you will find in Italian media. And the parallels that you can draw to Indian media today over the past decade is really quite something. I mean, that's why you will find very little of Italian media. I'm not going to quote from the articles because there's barely anything. Like you will find literally nothing of what the Italian media was doing at that point of time
Also,
because
you don't
everything
know
was
Italian,
self-censored.
no? That's
I mean,
also.
there are translations available online, Sandy. What are you talking about? Right? But there was massive amount of censorship. I do not want to take away the power that media had at a point of time before censorship started becoming really bad, because it does start with self censorship. I will not say that Mussolini and his fascist government was responsible for stomping down on media and stomping down on media freedom. Media did that to itself first, as is the case with Indian media. There is a gentleman I know, he's a family friend who's a very, very annoying person. He was talking to me about how he's really fortunate to have worked in journalism. He's now in PR. He's talking about how he was really fortunate of having worked in journalism during the Congress era because they were allowed to report on things. Now, when the Modi government came in power, he was very much still in media. He was just making a transition. He was still a journalist and making a transition to greener pastures. And at that point of time, and even till today, I will mention that he was very pro Modi. So he himself backed off reporting on a bunch of things that he should have reported on early on, right? And media does this. This is, of course, anecdotal evidence. This does not mean that it applies everywhere. It's not empirical evidence. But it is seen over and over again that self-censorship predates what happens after the government starts interfering more and more, right? It's almost like an abusive relationship. They will see what they can get away with first, right? Now, at the top of the episode, I mentioned that I will basically be covering media coverage in global north. But I would be remiss to not make a special note of our very own fascist media that was gaining ground in India in the form of RSS and its stooges, right? Pretty much the same time as Mussolini was rising to power, right? And I'm going to take from majorly, my main source has been this paper called Hindutva Tie-Up with Fascism in 1930s, Economic and Political Weekly. This was written in 2000 by this Italian researcher called Marzia Casolari. If you haven't heard of Marzia Casolari, I would highly recommend looking her up. She has done extensive research, right? She published this paper in 2000, and then later in 2020, she published a book called In the Shadow of the Swastika, The Relationships Between Indian Radical Nationalism, Italian Fascism, and Nazism. She is widely hated by the right wing in India, by the Hindutva gang. She is quoted massively by the left, right? So she's quite a prominent feature in Indian politics as far as only discussions are concerned, because she's done a lot of research work, right? So I am quoting from her paper. Right? She says, from 1924 to 1935, Kesari regularly published editorials and articles about Italy, fascism, and Mussolini. For those of you who are not aware of Kesari, I'm going away from the quote as of now. Kesari was a Maharashtrian publication and very much a right-wing one, right? It was almost RSS mouthpiece, right? So coming back to what her paper says, What impressed the Marathi journalists was the socialist origin of fascism and the fact that the new regime seemed to have transformed Italy from a backward country to a first-class power. Indians could not know then that behind the demagogic rhetoric of the regime, there was very little substance. Moreover, the Indian observers were convinced that fascism had restored order in a country previously upset by political tensions. In a series of editorials, Kesari described the passage from liberal government to dictatorship as a shift from an anarchy to an orderly situation, where social struggles had no more reason to exist. The Marathi newspaper gave considerable space to the political reforms carried out by Mussolini, in particular the substitution of the election of members of parliament with their nomination. This, she's referring to an article of January 17, 1928. So by 1928, Mussolini was very much fully in power, right? And the replacement of parliament itself with the Great Council of Fascism. Mussolini's idea was the opposite of that of democracy, and it was expressed by the dictator's principle, according to which one man's government is more useful and more binding for the nation than the democratic institutions, which is very much in line with what RSS and BJP believe, right? Is all this not reminiscent of the principle of obedience to one leader followed by the RSS? This is basically, she's asking that, like Casolari is asking that in her paper, right? The paper continues. Finally, a long article of August 13th, 1929, Italy and the Young Generations, stated that the Italian young generation had succeeded the old one to lead the country. That had resulted in the fast ascent of Italy in every field. The article went on to describe at length organization of the Italian society according to fascist models. The principal reasons of discipline of the Italian youths were strong religious feelings, widespread amongst the population, attachment to the family, and the respect of traditional values. No divorce, no singles, no right to vote for women, whose only duty was to sit at home by the fireplace. The article focused on the fascist youth
I'm
organizations, the
sorry. Who's
Balila.
making food? What?
That is true. But that's how the RSS and also Mussolini's government, all fascist governments, that's how they that's how they presented women. No actual labor. Anyway, Casolari in her book also talks about RSS shakhas as in the RSS centers, being modeled after Mussolini's black shirts. She talks about V.D. Savarkar being a British stooge and a lot of other facts that piss off the right wing massively. And for that reason alone, I really like her. I absolutely really, really like her work. A couple of interviews I've read of her, quite fantastic. But coming back to the media coverage in India as a whole, there was a weird corner of the country that did support Mussolini. And I guess today, a century later, that weird corner has turned into a whole ass country, right? That's how the right wing has expanded, and that's what we are doing today. And that's it for today as well. Right? This was about Mussolini while his rise to power and during his regime, what media outlook was, how the media behaved across the globe, and how they were anything but objective. Next episode, we'll be talking about the media coverage of Hitler during his rise to power, right? With Hitler, things were same, but different, right? For Mussolini, journalists fucked up, right? The media publications fucked up massively, but they depicted him as this larger than life figure, and they basically praised him all the time. Now, the global North media absolutely fucked up with the reporting on Hitler as well. But unlike the reporting on Mussolini, they, especially the American media, they fully made fun of Hitler during the time that this very, very dangerous man was rising to power. Okay, they would say things like Hitler suggests Charlie Chaplin, that his face itself was a caricature, that his voters were impressionable, and that was just a snootier way of saying stupid. Okay. And then, as Hitler was at the peak of his power, the media took a much darker turn. They started publishing soft lifestyle stories about him. So it's quite an insane series of events, and we will get into that next week. In many, many ways, it was the coverage was far more horrifying than of Mussolini. Right. So I hope to see you next week for that. And now is the time for my recommendation of the week. But before that, do you guys have any thoughts?
I'm still stuck on that aspect of nobody cooking food at home. I don't know how they manage it. I mean, no wonder Italians they were so fit and strong and athletic and light. They were not having food only.
And that makes people strong. It literally is the
No,
reason people die.
no, but that's why they might have been light because they were not having food.
This is actually, you've touched upon a very important point, because across this now in a lot of literature is being covered and a lot of research is being covered, which is invisible labor, uh, primarily by women historically and traditionally, where women's labor at home, which sustains, you being able to go out and live your lives, is considered not labor.
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
yeah. But that was not the point of the episode. The point of the episode was, I feel like the entire point is now gone, Sandy. We were talking about media biases and everything. What about that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
You're welcome. What's your recommendation?
Prakar, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on what we have discussed?
I think things haven't really changed from what it was and what it is
Right?
right now. With the medium has just changed. I mean, it has just made it even like worse than how it was. I mean, now spreading information is so easy that things can go to worse in no time. Back then
Yeah.
it just took a little more time things to go worse. Now it is so easy, so nothing
Yeah.
has really changed. So I don't know what we are doing as a country or as
The world
you
as a
know the
whole, like
world.
humanity as
Yeah,
a whole.
yeah,
Yeah, it's quite depressing. My deeply disturbed mind finds history fascinating for this very reason, because
yeah,
so much of it, like when I'm reading so much of history, I find parallels in my living memory. And,
yeah,
Sandy will attest to the fact that my living memory is not great, right? Firstly, it is just short period of time. And secondly, I don't remember most of the things from like 1990s and the 2000s. And even then, so much of it is just getting repeated over and over and over again. And none of this is
yeah,
a secret, right? None of this is you have to dig too much to find this out. Again, I am not a journalist. I did not have to go around digging, to like from with information that was not available online. All of what I bring to this episode or to my episodes in general, all of it is available online. I don't have to talk to somebody for it. I don't have to go to some place where I have to find out a source. I have to get them to speak to me anonymously and stuff like that. People have already done that, and it is all on record. And yet we just continue doing this. It's so wild. But
yeah.
Maybe
yeah.
everyone has ADHD, Ashmita.
There's your explanation.
We
Okay.
do shit. We drop a giant turd and immediately forget about the giant turd, and we again go back to dropping a giant turd. And this is this self-fulfilling prophecy and circle that will keep circling down the toilet drain till the end of time.
See,
There you have your explanation.
Ashmita,
You're welcome again.
Ashmita, your episode could have been just a statement, but no.
I had to go about it this roundabout way of actually informing people. Fuck me. Uh, anyway, my recommendation.
Recommendation.
So, because we have been talking about fascism, my recommendation is, and I have genuinely forgotten if I have recommended this before. Okay. So, if it is a repeat recommendation, I hope the new
Well,
listeners are.
Here you go again. This
yes.
is how we keep repeating fascism. This is exactly how it works. My
So, my
my conspiracy
recommendation.
theory is ADHD is being spread by all the fascist leaders in countries across the world so that we keep forgetting and keep recollecting them. You know, that's my conspiracy theory. More research needs to be done into this. Why does every second
See,
person have ADHD these days? There is a reason why. Because it's in our water, it's in our food. All the GMO is
see,
ADHD.
Yeah.
for our audience, if the next episode you don't see Sandy and if he's abducted for saying that, just telling you guys, we know the reason why he was abducted by
To
the.
be fair, I have said far worse things. So if there's somebody
No,
who's going to be attacked first.
he's spilling the truth. What if this is the truth and they don't want
Of
people
all
to
the
know the truth?
things, of all the things in the 21st century, 22nd century, this is the one thing that makes the most sense. Tell me
Yeah.
why 3 out of 5 people has ADHD these days. Because we are being
What?
poisoned with ADHD. Our governments are
Wait,
feeding us
Sandy,
ADHD hormones, and because of
also
that, we
calm the
keep
fuck down.
forgetting.
It's not yet 22nd century. It is still 21st century.
Till 22nd century, all of us will have ADHD,
How
and we'll
does it
forget,
matter?
and we'll keep
How does it
re-electing
matter? We
fascist
will forget.
governments.
Ashmita, you will
Okay.
forget. How does it
Yes,
matter?
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
My recommendation is this absolutely fantastic post-apocalyptic book. It's actually a series called the Parable series, starting with the Parable of Sower by Octavia Butler, right? And the first book starts with a complete societal collapse because of global climate change and economic crisis, and it gets worse and better at the same time after that. It is exceptional. It's genuinely one of the best speculative fiction I have ever read. Also, Butler was, without an iota of doubt, the greatest sci-fi and speculative fiction writer ever. So I very strongly recommend reading anything by Octavia Butler, to be very fair, but start off with the Parable series because it is beautifully done. Very anti-fascism sort of fiction. And I have always very strongly believed that you bring down systems and you become part of better systems by reading fiction. It's the easiest to sort of empathize and put yourself in other people's shoes. And I would very strongly recommend reading this. And that is it for today. That's all from me. I will say a lot of this episode was based on papers and articles, and I have typically what I do is when I read something from a paper, I will check out that paper's credentials, and I will check out the publishing house credentials. If it is in the media bias fact checker, it's showing unreliable. I will not rely on it. But I am only one person and I am not an expert in this. So there are chances that I have absolutely fucked up and spoken about things that are not true. So if you know about this, if you have come across information that is absolutely against what I have been talking about, I would love to read up on that as well. So you can please write to us and send us that information on don't know do care 1@gmail.com. One is numerical, or you can DM us or post a comment on Instagram or YouTube. The handles are the same at DKDC Podcast. And of course, to the listeners and to the viewers, if you like what you hear, please, of course, like and comment and everything, rate us. But more importantly, please do share this with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family. That is how we are reaching all of the new listeners that we are reaching. And we really appreciate you sharing and spreading the word. That's how we are growing. And we are very grateful for you doing that.
And especially, please share it with all your ADHD friends. There's a conspiracy abound, and we need to get to the bottom of it. Until next time, please take care. Bye bye.